I know what the super audio headphone nerds in the audience are thinking right now. Is that an original Sony MDR-R10? It is not. Well, maybe it's that Hyphaman HE-R10 that came out a few years ago. It is not. This is the ESLabs ES-R10, which recently came out after years of development. This is a tribute, sort of a recreation, if you will, of the original Sony MDR-R10. And if you don't know what that is, that's okay. I didn't really know much of this history. I'd sort of heard it mentioned, but I did a little bit of a deep dive to get myself caught up to speed. So the Sony MDR-R10 was like their flagship, sort of like Halo, world's best headphone. Came out in 1989. This is like Japan's going crazy, tons of money flying around, a lot of interesting audio innovation stuff is happening. Stax is doing crazy stuff at that time frame. And Sony's like, we're going to just do it. We're just going to make the most ridiculous headphone. I don't know if they were the first to use biocellulose, but it was definitely not common, at least at the time. And they may have been the first to bring a production headphone with a biocellulose driver to market. Went on for a handful of years of production. I don't know when it finally ceased production. There's something like only 2,000 of them in the world, and probably less than that now. And they're incredibly sought after in the head-fi collector community, and have this sort of legendary status as being one of the best headphones of all time. They were like $2,500 new in 1989 dollars. I haven't done the conversion, but that makes them high-end flagship price by today's dollars. They came in like a leather suitcase and stuff, the whole nine. And their cups were this beautiful machined Japanese elm, which the premise of is that it creates this acoustic chamber, which is supposed to make this closed back headphone sort of perform in many ways like a more open back sound. So Hyphaman came out with something they call the HE-R10 a couple years ago. They did a planar version, and then they did a dynamic version. The dynamic would be closer to this, but from all accounts that I've read, it's still its own beast, aside from having a very similar like profile to the cup shape. They're not necessarily paying as much attention to the material story or like trying to recreate the headphone. They're sort of saying, hey, that chamber is pretty cool. We're going to like slap it on some newer tech that we can, manufacture with more modern manufacturing processes. So ESLabs is out of Hong Kong. If you're not familiar with them, it's a small outfit. I reviewed the ESLabs ES1A, which is this large diameter sort of Omega tribute, Stax Omega tribute, but not as like sort of rigidly following in line with trying to recreate anything, more just their own great E-Stat headphone. I have a video on that and I love it. It's an amazing thing. And they do like Sigma retrofits and other cool stuff with E-Stats. So when I found out they were doing a dynamic headphone, I was like, oh, that's a left turn that I wasn't expecting. All this like knowledge developed around the world of E-Stats to go and do a dynamic. But I think you see a lot of the same sort of similarities from the owner and creator of like really loving the history of audio and really being detail oriented and going back and trying to figure out how do you create parts today that sort of mirror production methods and materials that existed at a different time. And you'd think that'd be easy because everything just gets better, right? But it's actually not that easy. Not everything gets better, and some things get much harder to do, especially when they've fallen out of favor. So my understanding is what these guys did is first they sought out like a bunch of reference pairs of not to like own, but just to have as benchmarks of Sony's. And the challenge is that, these are old now. These are from, 30 years ago. Like, do they, materials start to break down? Like, how much have they been played? Like, I think it's probably pretty hard today, even if you could get your hands on an original MDR-R10, to know if you're actually hearing what Sony wanted you to hear. but I think they said that they did get a hold of one like very good condition pair and then some others in various conditions and sort of benchmarked against them. They used optical 3D scanning to like try to get very specific data about how to CNC this cup to match the original Sony design. They use a 50 millimeter biocellulose driver, just like the original. Obviously, it's, you know, going to be more modern production, which is actually probably a very good thing. It's got the same, like, there's like a 3-point suspension in here that required them to like tool up for like special little, I don't know, like kind of grommet things that hold the suspension in place, or that are the suspension elements. Just a ton of effort like went into all the little materials and components inside. And apparently the pads are like really a signature aspect of the original Sony, and that they're big and they're just so soft, but not without structure and not without sort of shape to them. And like everyone knows, if you pad swapped, how much of a difference a pad makes to a headphone. So if you're listening to an old pair of headphones where the pads are totally smushed or deteriorated, like, are you hearing that headphone properly? So they did some stuff with like die cutting the foam to have perforation and stuff. And, you know, they have this kind of like very soft, pillowy, like vintage kind of look to them. And they feel like they look. They are just like little clouds, like little fluffy dream clouds. The other interesting thing of note is I can't actually find this piece of data, but I'm pretty sure the original MDR did not have a detachable cable. That was probably not in vogue in 1989. So these guys have made, you know, now it's very nice with a fancy pair of headphones like this to have a detachable cable. So they made this one, and what I really like, if I can get this thing to focus. Okay. Nope. All right. Anyway, what I really like is that when these even have a little L and R in here, that I'm actually never seen this little style of connector used before, but they screw on, and when they're on, they look like they're not detachable, and I think that's just like such a nice little detail when you're doing a tribute. And then they got, you know, a little bit of their little own flair in here with the ESLabs logo on there and stuff. So very nice cable, 1/4 inch terminated. I did ask the owner if it was possible to get balanced, and he said sure thing. That's the nice thing about working with these super small companies, is you can sort of make these special requests and in some cases have them honored. And then, you know, leather here, and then the original had this like interesting, super cool suspension strap, which is very like light as a feather. These things, I don't know what they weigh. I should have put them on a scale. They don't feel that light in your hand. They weigh something for sure. On your head, they feel like nothing. It's ridiculous how light and comfy these things are. And I don't know, there's just a ton of air volume inside here, or maybe the like seal isn't super precise, but they're not hot. They're just like, they're real dreamy to wear. You can wear them all darn day. This is all like, I'm guessing, machined aluminum, and then some other plates here. So it's a lot of parts, it's a lot of stuff to figure out. And the finishes are all really nice. And the wood is just, the wood's great. And it's so pretty. And I guess they as well use that original Japanese oak from the Sonys. Cool. So tribute piece, well researched, well put together, lots of love and care. Does it sound good? It sounds good. It sounds really good. And I listened to these a lot before I dug too much into the history of the original R10s, trying not to just bias myself. And I will say, you know, I made notes as I was listening, and when I went back and read the reviews, it's like I was reading my notes back of the original R10. These headphones have this sort of like very, at first seeming like very polite, very easygoing manner, but with just a ton of detail and energy, especially in the treble region. And that seemed to, in many ways, be the signature of the R10, is bringing forward all this good information and this energetic presentation, but in a way that was not, you know, draining, annoying, sibilant, or just exhausting. And Yes, the treble is just like it's light. It's floats. It's detailed. It's energetic, but it's also, like I said, somehow not fatiguing, and I find that to be a very unique combination of characteristics that I've not heard in a lot of headphones. The mids, they're smooth, they're sweet. Like female vocals, for instance, are just so lush and detailed. They're like clearly differentiated, and they hold space within the music, within the presentation, but it's not like in a forced way. It's not like overly emphasized. Like some headphones you'll put on in the mids, like just like bam, like jump out at you. And at first it's kind of enjoyable, but then you're like, it's kind of taking the whole thing apart for me. So I like that this has a bit of that like wall of sound smoothness, but also where there is space between elements and there is separation. The bass, the bass is the controversial part of these for sure, and it was with the original Sonys too. And apparently the low serial numbers of the originals are like the bass light version, and then there was like a bassier variant. But I think even the bassier variant is still notably less bass heavy than a lot of modern counterparts, especially when you're talking about closebacks. I think a lot of people go to a closeback because they want that big, ridiculous deep bass, and that is not what you will find here. It is detailed bass, but it is somewhat shallow and somewhat lacking in just gravitas and impact. The crazy thing is, like, it's not dissatisfying. Like, I like bass. I don't know if I'd go as far as saying I'm a bass head, but I genuinely dig some great, deep reaching bass. And I never, like, stop to go, oh man, I wish there's more bass in these things. Now, if I A-B'd them against something, it would definitely jump out that they did not have the level of bass of some other closebacks and some other dynamic driver headphones. But, like I said, it's like, I guess it's just part of the package. Maybe I've drank the Kool-Aid. I couldn't tell you, but for some reason it never really bummed me out, because I guess it is there and it is detailed, and so there's a lot of satisfaction to be taken in that. This has a really nice sense of space for a closeback. Like it's very, very open. The way it sort of images around you is really satisfying. Things sort of kind of float around your head, and you can pick them out in space. It's wonderful with like sparser music, like especially stuff with a lot of instrumentation, like jazz or chamber music, strings and horns. Like horns are great. Never like I love horns. I love good raspy detail on a trumpet or something, but never I don't like it when horns are like grating into my head. And just it's really nicely balanced there. Driving it, it's pretty easy to drive. It's 32 ohms, 102 dB. That being said, even though I think you could probably run it off like a laptop or a phone, I don't think you're gonna really get the most out of this headphone. It is pretty amp dependent, and it's pretty sensitive. Like running it off of a very nice amps and sound that I hear nothing on other headphones. It was picking up little bits of like transformer hum or like little chatter from the tubes, like very subtle stuff. So it seems to be very sensitive to the cleanliness of the power. I tried it with a couple tube amps, a couple solid state amps. I really liked it with sort of higher end warmer sounding solid state amps. That seemed to be the sweet spot, with like very black backgrounds, played to its fluidity strength, but gave it lots of information so it could really produce the details for me. If you put it with a more energetic amp, you could get it to hit a little harder. You could certainly wake it up, but I don't know. Like I said, it's like I don't want to change this headphone. I don't want to like fix it. I'm not interested in like trying to make it be something that it isn't. I think it has a very unique point of view, which, I haven't heard an R10. I don't know. Is this what the original Sony sounded like? I cannot tell you. But from what I've read, it seems to be directionally very similar. And from everything that I understand from the efforts put into making it sound similar, that was the goal. In fact, this may sound more like an R10 than an existing R10, in that this is all fresh stuff. Whereas any R10 you're listening to, today is vintage antique. So who's this for? Is this for you? I don't know if this is for you. I just talked about all of its stuff. You decide. But I mean, if you're like a crazy head-fi nerd and you've just always wanted to hear an R10 and you don't want to spend whatever astronomical collector price I saw something like 15 grand. That seems crazy. Even at 5 grand, it would be an intense investment in a vintage headphone. You know, this might be your chance to hear an R10 and to have that experience. Or maybe you just want an incredibly comfortable close back with all day listenability, but that's full of detail and interest and, you know, a little bit of romance and sort of a natural tonality. This is really comfortable and very pretty. I mean, pretty, I don't know. It's like, it looks crazy on the head. It's a very, very interesting design. But, you know, when you know it's in the name of science, it's in the name of creating this great chamber. I guess the other thing that's interesting is, like, you know, the driver is angled, which is why the cup is angled, presumably. And I don't think that was super common at the time when Sony was doing it either. So, like, not like recognizing the shape of a human ear and sort of angling, you know, to reduce, you know, weirder refractions of like the sound waves bouncing around other parts of your ear and getting reflected back in is pretty cool too. So, okay, I think that is a lot of talking about this headphone. Yeah, if I miss anything, you can reach out to the folks who make it. I'm sure they'll fill in the gaps. Until next time, this is Signcraft signing out.